My name is Karen. I'm a 25-year-old employee. My grandfather, who raised me, passed away 6 months ago. Today is the day when the lawyer will open my grandfather's will. That's why I was visiting my grandfather's house with my sister Susan, who is 4 years older and is my only family. Our parents passed away in an accident 20 years ago, and since then, we were raised by our grandparents. Since my grandmother passed away from an illness a few years ago, my grandfather's spirits have been declining year by year, and he became frequently ill. Out of concern, I lived in an apartment near my grandfather's house and often went back to check on him.
"You're a grown woman. It's unbecoming to keep coming back home,"
my grandfather would say, but he would always laugh cheerfully nonetheless. Then one day, as I went to visit like I usually did, I found my grandfather lying in pain at the entrance. In a panic, I called the ambulance. But my grandfather passed away just like that. "Hey, what are you daydreaming for? At least prepare some tea." My sister's voice brought me back to reality. "Right, the lawyer will be here soon." I responded and headed to the kitchen. Taking a quick glance, I saw my sister lazily stretching out her legs on the mat and yawning. I could still smell my sister's strong perfume, even in the kitchen a bit away, and I made a face. "She's same as always," I murmured under my breath, placing the kettle on the stove. My sister has always been the type to only care about herself. Once she hit her teens, she started dyeing her hair as if it were natural. She hung out with the so-called delinquents and was always out and about. Demanding money without working part-time was a given. Even when she caused trouble and our grandparents had to apologize on her behalf, she was unperturbed. I, being the quiet one, often had to deal with the fallout. She doesn't seem to have changed much, even after becoming an adult. She doesn't have a stable job and seems to just be drifting around while working part-time. I knew she had been asking our grandfather for money whenever I wasn't around. It was easy to imagine that she would have found this all too troublesome if it weren't for the inheritance. "Ah, you must be the lawyer. Thanks for coming today." I heard my sister's high-pitched, formal voice indicating that the lawyer had arrived. I hurriedly placed tea leaves into the teapot and headed towards the entrance. "Thank you for coming today." I had met the lawyer at the funeral. His eyes were as kind as my grandfather's. A lawyer's badge shone brightly on his chest. After offering incense in front of my grandfather's portrait, he took a sip of the tea I served, and then took out my grandfather's will. It was entrusted to him by my grandfather while he was still alive. The content was as follows. My elder sister Susan was to inherit $20 million in cash. And I, the younger daughter, was to inherit this house and the land it sits on. Upon hearing this, my sister burst out laughing. "$20 million in cash for the elder daughter? And only an old house for the younger one? How hilarious!" "It's just right for someone as plain as you." "It's not just the house. There's also the land," I retorted, to which my sister laughed snidely. "The value of this land in such a godforsaken place is hardly surprising. I would have preferred cash. I guess Grandpa must have had a soft spot for me after all." I can't deny that I am a bit shocked. I suppose my grandfather wanted me to protect his beloved house and land where he spent his life with my grandmother.
"Huh, a house and land. That's pretty awesome, isn't it?"
Brian, my boyfriend, exclaimed in surprise after hearing my story. I shook my head, implying it's not as great as it sounds. "Not really. My sister inherited $20 million in cash. That's more impressive." I felt a sense of emptiness saying it out loud. Even though I was being modest, verbalizing it felt like an acknowledgement.
Wow, beautiful. And have money now? She's the Moores. The better victory.
I shot Brian a side glance for his insensitive comment. Realizing his gaffe, he joked.
Your comfort means more to me than money, Karen.
Brian has been my boyfriend since I started working. We met at a social event, and being of the same age, we clicked well. I've introduced him to my grandfather and my sister. While he hasn't proposed yet, I have been considering marriage. Today was our first date in a while, and I ended up telling Brian about my inheritance. I suppose it was because I thought he would become my husband someday. I had no idea I would come to regret this. A few days later, I was visiting the family home I had inherited from my grandfather. I had intended to clean and sort out my grandfather's belongings. The property was large, but the house was modest. I figured I could manage it on my own. I looked around the house and pondered. It's close to my workplace. Maybe I should move here. Living here leisurely with a cat doesn't sound too bad. There would be no rent to pay, and while there might be maintenance costs for deterioration, I have been working hard and saving, so it shouldn't be a problem. Maybe someday with Brian. Feeling embarrassed at the thought, I shook my head vigorously. I rolled up my sleeves to begin cleaning. Just then, I received a call. My sister's name appeared on my smartphone screen. Sis, what's up? Hey, Karen. Having fun all by yourself in that old house? My sister seemed to be drunk. She always had a unique way of extending her words, but today it was particularly bad. Sis, you're drinking, aren't you? It's still afternoon. I pointed out with a sigh, to which she exaggeratedly sighed back. Oh, you're such a Miss Goody Two-Shoes. I was right. She had been drinking. I was thinking about moving here eventually. I answered my sister's question, hoping to end the conversation quickly. Really? I'm enjoying a suite in a luxury hotel right now. My sister raised her voice in a somewhat exaggerated way. Guess who I'm with right now? I have no idea. Boring? It's that kind of attitude that'll make Brian dislike you. What?
I'm sorry, Karen.
I was flabbergasted when Brian's voice took over the line. The sudden intervention of Brian threw me off balance. Dizzying question marks pop up in my head. But I resent my imagination. At this point, a disgusting imagination had been completed in my head. Surprised, huh? My sister's mean-spirited voice chimed in. Ever since you introduced him to me, I thought Brian was quite a catch. She rattled off boastfully about how she had been attracted to Brian since I introduced him, how she knew where he worked because of me, and how she had approached him as soon as he left work. He came along readily when she asked. He told her that she was hundreds of times more attractive than me. I listened in stunned silence.
Karen, I'm really sorry.
The next voice I heard was Brian's again. Tell me it's a mistake. As I tried to utter words that wouldn't come, he spoke again.
As a man, I had to take this opportunity.
What?
I do feel bad about it, but come on, it's impossible to resist a beautiful woman who has $20 million, right?
The way he spoke, as if asking me to understand, drained my emotions away. I felt a cold sensation, like my blood was being drained from me. You know what? I don't need a man like you. At my words, I could hear my sister laughing uproariously in the background. The voice on the phone changed back to my sister, Well, that's how it is, and from now on, let's not consider ourselves sisters, okay? I wouldn't want you turning to me just because you're broke. With those words, she ended the call. Overwhelmed by emotions that had lagged behind, all I could do was cry out. 5 years have passed since then. I had a cat in my lap, dozing off in front of my laptop. The cat was also purring contentedly in sleep. Today is my day off, but there is still a bit of work left from what I have brought home. Oh no, this won't get the work done. I felt guilty, but I had to move the cat off my lap. Just as I reached out, my phone started to ring. An unfamiliar number was displayed on my smartphone. Thinking it could be work-related, I answered the call without any suspicion. Hello? Karen, long time no see. I instantly knew who it was and froze. The distinctive way of speaking was unmistakably my sister's. It's you, Karen, isn't it? I can tell just from your initial hello. After all, I'm your big sister. 5 years had passed, which should make Susan 34. A smirk formed at the corner of my mouth at her unchanging way of talking. You're just the same. By the way, I came home and there's a hotel standing. Did you sell the house? That's none of your business. Oh, come on. It's quite a grand hotel, huh? You must have made a good chunk of change, huh? Getting fed up, I was about to end the call when she started to chatter about her current situation. According to Susan, she had blown through the inheritance in about 2 years. Now, she even had a considerable amount of debt. Even Brian, who she's still hanging around, seemed to be drowning in debt. I was speechless. Honestly, I couldn't care less. So, lend me some money. Against Susan's yelling, I answered calmly. I've always wondered why Grandpa distributed his estate that way, but on the day you took Brian from me and cut ties, I understood. I started talking slowly. 5 years ago, when Brian broke up with me, I was crushed. After crying my heart out, I sat dazed in my room, staring into space. I'm such a fool. As I murmured this, large tears began to spill again. My gaze fell on a painting I had made as a child and had gifted to my grandfather. He had framed it and kept it hanging lovingly. Rising unsteadily, I picked up the painting. Grandpa. When the feelings of nostalgia and loneliness welled up and tears started to come, I felt something drop from the back of the frame. Picking it up, I saw it was a fresh sheet of notepaper addressed to me. I remembered how when I was little, I used to stick notes on the back of this frame and exchange secret messages with my grandfather. It was like a family journal, really. Knowing that I was to inherit the house, he probably figured I'd find this note. I'm glad I noticed. I shuddered at the thought that I might have left it unnoticed. To Karen. The date on the letter was just before my grandfather passed. I knew you'd definitely notice this letter. Right now, you're probably wondering why I distributed my estate in such a manner. Cash to your sister, and an old house and land for you. It may seem like I favored Susan, but that's not the case. Despite any claims of favoritism, I wanted to leave most of my estate to you, who cared for me till the end. I finally understood what had been bothering me. No matter what, Grandpa thought more of me, huh? I'm sure I was deeply hurt by Susan's words at that time. Despite having loved my grandfather more, a kind of jealousy, I continued to read the letter. But Susan would not be satisfied with a regular division. This child, even as her grandfather, I must admit, she's terribly greedy. Exactly, Grandpa. She even took my boyfriend from me. That's what I want to tell him in my heart.
That's why I arranged it this way. If at first glance Susan appears to have received the better deal, she won't pay attention to your share.
According to Grandfather's letter, the value of this land in our area is continuously increasing due to ongoing urban development.
As of the time I'm writing this, it's not worth Susan's $20 million yet, but the value of this land will surely increase in the future.
When I read this far, my eyes widened in surprise.
You can live here if you're attached to it, or you can sell it when its value rises enough to make a good profit. All I want is for you to be happy.
When I finished conveying the content of the letter, Susan clicked her tongue and said, "That old hag!" I lived in that house for a while, but when my marriage was settled, I decided to sell the house just like Grandfather's letter said. The land value had risen enough. Anyway, I'm never lending you money. Susan seemed frustrated, but as if she had a good idea, she said this. "Right, if you want, I can give Brian back to you. So help your sister. It's a good deal, right?" At this moment, I heard something snap inside of me. Enough is enough. You've been taken care of by Grandpa, and yet you haven't shown a hint of gratitude. I despise you for that, and you're not my sister anymore. And besides, I'm already married. I don't need Brian, and I don't even want to see his face. Stay out of my life for good. I said what I needed to say and hung up. I quickly set up call blocking, and my cat on my lap was cowering on the bed. I quickly picked up my cat and said, "I'm sorry." After that, it seems Susan contacted Brian, and they both stormed into our old house. Did they try to return Brian to me? There's a respectable inn there now, but they must have misunderstood something and were shouting that they were my relatives. Even though I just sold the land and had nothing to do with it. It's simple for those two. I sold the land, and an inn was built, equals I must be the owner of the inn. Of course, the staff reported to the police. The two of them were arrested because they had destroyed several items in the inn. Furthermore, it was discovered that they had been committing marriage fraud for money in the past. It seems they'll be sent to prison together. I was also questioned by the police, but I was able to prove that I had no involvement quickly, as we were estranged, and was released. As my husband, who came to pick me up, and I were walking through the station, we heard screaming and turned our gaze. And there were Susan and Brian, whom looked completely different. Fortunately, they didn't notice us. Both of them had messy hair, worn-out clothes, and looked nothing like the two people I remember. Especially Susan, who never skipped her makeup and fashion, looked even more different. They were probably being moved into a different location. As I watched the two of them, filled with a sense of melancholy, my husband and I locked eyes. I grabbed the hand he extended, and we left the police station.
"Are you okay?"
My husband, always concerned, looked at me with gentle eyes. "I'm okay. I have you, and this little one." I touched my barely noticeable belly and smiled back. In my belly, a new member of our family is growing. Money is important, but there's something even more valuable. That's what I want to teach our child, with my husband by my side. I was on cloud 9, having just married the love of my life. One day, a package arrived from my mother-in-law. I excitedly opened it, only to find a surprise of another kind. It sent my relationship with my husband spiraling into a nightmare. But I'll be damned if I let her win. I refused to let things go her way. My name is Jessica. I married my husband David just 6 months ago. We're still newlyweds. We were planning on making many happy memories together, but then something unimaginable happened. I had no way of knowing what was about to happen. The trigger came a month after our wedding. I was cleaning the house, now a full-time homemaker, when the doorbell rang. It was a package for me. The sender? My mother-in-law. A package from my mother-in-law? I wonder what it is. I had received no notice of a package being sent, and David hadn't mentioned anything either. Curious, I opened the box. Inside, I found clothes, not exactly what you'd call fashionable, and very well worn. What? What are these? Old clothes? I was flabbergasted by the array of second-hand clothes. Some even had holes in them. There were clothes that must have been fashionable once, but now they were just garish. Just then, the phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. "Oh, Jessica, dear, did you get my gift?" Gift? No, no, no. What part of that is a gift? They're clearly old clothes, and they're hideous. How can anyone possibly see that as a gift? As I was bewildered by this unexpected situation, my mother-in-law started explaining casually. "You see, those clothes are ones I used to wear a long time ago. Found them when I was tidying up my closet." But mother-in-law, some of them have holes in them." "Don't worry, dear. I included some new ones I bought recently. Please try them on." Despite my confusion, my mother-in-law chattered away cheerfully. Was this harassment, or was it really just kindness? Honestly, I couldn't figure out my mother-in-law's true intentions. My husband David came home from work and immediately noticed the mountain of old clothes. "Did Mom just give you a gift? That's nice." It was more like she had given them away than given them. Even so, if it was really out of kindness for my mother-in-law, I didn't want to seem ungrateful, so I didn't mention the holes or the poor taste to David. A month later, another package arrived from my mother-in-law. As expected, it was filled entirely with second-hand clothes. The amount was incomparable to the last time. Plus, the designs were even worse than before. Ugh! Who would wear these? I felt bad for my mother-in-law, but this was nothing short of an unwelcome favor. They were just crowding my closet. I should give them away or sell them at a flea market. As I was thinking this, the phone rang. It was my mother-in-law again. "Oh, Jessica, did the clothes arrive? I gathered some really special pieces this time." My mother-in-law seemed overly cheerful. Even so, it would be problematic if she kept sending them regularly. They're old and not to my taste. "Mother-in-law, I appreciate your sentiment, but I don't usually wear such flashy clothes." When I indirectly refused, she suddenly got angry. Maybe my words had rubbed her the wrong way. "Excuse me, Jessica? What kind of things are you saying about the clothes I went out of my way to send? The correct response is, thank you." "No, I mean I appreciate the thought, but..." "Just wear them, Jessica. Sending you all those clothes will surely save you some money, won't it? The next time you come over, make sure you're wearing the stuff I've given you, okay?" My mother-in-law gave me a one-sided command and then hung up the phone. I sighed. I made her angry. What was more, I never knew that she was the type of person to force her opinions on others so vehemently. That night, I decided to gather up my courage and talk to my husband about it. "David, do you have a minute?"
"Wait, you got more presents for my mom?"
"Well, that's what I wanted to talk about." David is still under the impression that I'm being sent presents that I would enjoy. When I explained the situation, his eyes widened.
Second-hand clothes?
Yes, second-hand clothes, and they're not my style at all. I can't possibly wear the clothes your mom sent. I tried to gently refuse over the phone, and she got really upset. Can you talk to her, David? David stayed silent for a while. I was troubled because of the stuff his mom had sent. Surely he'd come up with a good solution to smooth things over between me and his mother.
I'll call Mom.
David walked out into the balcony and took out his smartphone. I hoped that he would be able to resolve this situation over the phone with his mom. But when he came back from his call, he said something outrageous.
Mom told me she was just trying to do something nice by sending you clothes. You make it sound like it's a nuisance. You should be more grateful.
I was baffled at David's words. Hold on a minute. I told you, right? I can't wear those clothes. They're not my style at all.
Mom said it's clothes she used to wear. Are you making fun of my mom's taste?
That's not what I meant. Besides, some of the clothes even have holes in them. Are you saying I should wear those?
Enough. Mom started crying when I told her you didn't like the clothes. Please don't upset her anymore.
After yelling at me, David stormed off into his own room, slamming the door behind him. Wait, what? Is it my fault? I never thought David would take his mom's side. Even if he didn't exactly take my side, he could at least try to understand my feelings. I felt as if I had been betrayed by my husband. Ultimately, another package from my mother-in-law arrived the following month. When I visited my in-laws' home, and it was discovered that I wasn't wearing the clothes she had sent, I went to all this trouble to send them to you. Why aren't you wearing them? She exploded.
Yeah, Mom went out of her way to send them to you.
David joined her side, against me.
No one really cares or notices what you're wearing. More importantly, it's absolutely the worst that you're wasting Mom's kindness like this.
It seemed David was completely on his mother's side. Do you even understand how I feel, being given tasteless old clothes, some even with holes, that are out of style? I felt everything was becoming absurd. All my effort not to spoil my relationship with my mother-in-law and all my explanations to my husband seemed to be in vain. And ignoring my feelings, David started treating me more like a housemaid than ever before.
What is this food? Are you skimping on it? You're lacking awareness as a wife. You're a full-time housewife, so you should do better. There are wrinkles in the laundry. My mother wouldn't make a mistake like this. Do it perfectly.
Is he, her, mini-me? He was becoming incredibly picky. When I bought new clothes, he yelled,
"Even though you wasted Mom's kindness, you're buying new clothes?"
Oh, I don't know if I can continue this married life any longer. I was pushed to the point where I started to think like that. Then one day, David's company's trip was confirmed.
Make sure you prepare for my company trip starting tomorrow.
I, who was treated almost like a housemaid recently, was naturally frustrated. However, upon thinking, this might be a chance for revenge. My mother-in-law was still sending me tasteless, worn-out clothes. From men's to children's items, even things that I had no idea what they are. Recently, she even started sending me clothes so dirty, I wondered where she picked them up. I dug out the men's clothes from there and stuffed them into David's travel bag. This should do. David's company trip was for 2 nights and 3 days. During this time, I stuffed all the rags that had been sent from my mother-in-law into his suitcase. The next day, as soon as David left for his trip, I began packing my things. When I left the house, I put divorce papers on the table that had already been filled out. At that same time, David, who was on his company trip, was being laughed at by his colleagues.
Hey, what's with those raggedy clothes, man? Did you pick them up from somewhere? Had a fight with your wife, didn't you?
Serves him right. I can picture David panicking. That night, as expected, David called me.
Hey, what's with the contents of this suitcase?
He was clearly furious, even over the phone. I held back laughter as I asked David, "Something wrong with your suitcase?"
What do you mean, something wrong? What's with these raggedy clothes? You got something wrong in your head? Making your husband wear such things?
You think I'm crazy? I said calmly. David, remember what you said, right? Those clothes were sent out of goodwill by your mom. Wasting such goodwill would be pretty strange for a son, wouldn't it? Apparently, David hadn't realized the clothes I packed were from his mother. At my revelation, he choked on his words. Hey, you listening? Those clothes were sent by your mom. Since you were all for blaming me alongside her, you'll be wearing them without complaint, right?
Well, that's...
David was utterly flustered. I told him outright. You understand now, right? Did you finally get a feel for what I was going through? I left the divorce papers at home.
Divorce?
I'll leave the rest to you. And with that, I hung up, leaving things unsaid. David bombarded me with calls and emails, all of which I ignored. Afterwards, I returned to my parents' house. A few days later, my mother-in-law called me. You listen here. You can't get divorced without my approval. If you don't listen, I'll hire a lawyer and sue you for emotional distress. I responded, feel free to do so. A week later, my mother-in-law told me to come to a meeting with a lawyer. I headed to the specified coffee shop. There, my mother-in-law, husband, and someone who seemed to be a lawyer were waiting. What's this? I've already decided on the divorce, so there's nothing to talk about now. With a look like she was about to bite me, my mother-in-law yelled. Don't mess around. After all we've done for you, we won't allow a selfish divorce.
Exactly.
My husband chimed in with her.
I've been made a laughingstock at work because of the clothes you made me wear. Now everyone at work is laughing at me.
A laughingstock? Isn't that directly mocking his own mother's taste in clothes? As I laughed in front of them, my mother-in-law glared with her eyes wide open. What's so funny? You're such a cheeky wife. She then turned to the lawyer. Hey, Mr. Lawyer, she can't possibly request a divorce from her position, can she?
I was told that the wife was the one causing the trouble.
The lawyer questioned, looking puzzled. To this I clearly stated. No, it's the other way around. I'm the one who's been harassed by my mother-in-law and husband, being sent clothes like garbage every single month. Upon hearing this, the lawyer seemed perplexed.
This is completely different from what I was told.
My mother-in-law also seemed flustered. Impatient with their reactions, my husband abruptly stood up.
That's it. I'm divorcing a useless wife like you. I'm going to demand a full emotional distress compensation.
He yelled at me. At the sound of his voice, all the customers turned to look at us. Taking advantage of this, I asked, So, does this mean I have to pay emotional distress compensation? Wait, who exactly are you talking to? Who? The person behind me. Huh? I kindly clarified that to my puzzled mother-in-law. Just then, a figure from the back of the room appeared before us. David and my mother-in-law were taken aback, their mouths agape with surprise.
It's been a while, Mom. David?
The person who appeared was David's brother, Sam.
What, Sam? Why are you here? Why am I here? Well, to defend Jessica, of course.
That's right. Sam, David's older brother, is a renowned attorney specializing in divorce. Initially, my mother-in-law sought his counsel, but when it became apparent that I was the one wronged, he chose to defend me. Wait a minute, Sam. Why?
I asked you to defend me, and you declined.
Of course I did.
Sam raised his voice.
Because it's clear to me that Jessica isn't at fault. And having heard her side of the story, I learned that you've been using the money I've been sending home every month under the pretense of hard times to torment Jessica, haven't you?
That is. Indeed, my mother-in-law had been receiving money from Sam every month. Surely some of it was used for living expenses, but she was using the excess to buy shoddy clothes to send to me. All for the purpose of tormenting me. Sam, in a short time, had researched these facts and saved the evidence.
And you, David, the verbal abuse you hurled at Jessica earlier, it's all been recorded.
Sam pulled out a voice recorder and played back the harsh words David had shouted earlier. Of course, this too will serve as substantial evidence in the divorce proceedings.
Hey Sam, you're kidding, right? Why would you side with Jessica instead of your own family?
In response to David's outburst, Sam answered firmly.
I'm a lawyer. No matter how you look at it, the fault lies with you two. Your lawyer also seems to see that there's no hope of winning. Maybe he should decline to represent you.
At Sam's words, David's lawyer nodded in agreement and quietly left the cafe.
So you two will be the ones paying the alimony. And Mom, I won't be sending any more money. Understand?
Leaving these words behind, Sam left the cafe with me. Thank you, Sam, for helping me even though you're busy. As I bowed my head, Sam gave me a warm smile.
No worries. I just can't stand injustice, family or not.
I'm really grateful for your help this time. Thank you so much. And so, thanks to Sam, I was able to divorce peacefully. Of course, I received a substantial alimony from my mother-in-law and David. After the divorce, I haven't heard from my mother-in-law or David, and have been living a peaceful life. Even though I had to part with Sam, who was so kind to me because I divorced David, I felt a bit sad. But I need to move on quickly and live my own life. The best life that David and my mother-in-law could ever envy. With that promise in my heart, I started my new life. My husband Robert and I were high school classmates. Our relationship started during our sophomore year school trip. I had a dream to become a doctor. At the same time, Robert had his own dream. He wanted to be a lawyer. We each pursued our dreams and enrolled in our respective universities. It seemed like everything was going smoothly, but Robert failed the bar exam 5 years in a row. After that, Robert started working in sales at a general corporation. On the other hand, I was able to become an obstetrician after 6 years of university and 2 years of residency.
Congrats on becoming a doctor and achieving your dream, Amy.
Robert rejoiced over my accomplishment as if it were his own. Thank you. I think things are going to get even busier from now on. I'm sorry if I have to cancel our dates more often than before. I had been called in for some emergencies several times during my residency. As a full-fledged doctor, I would have to work with more responsibility, especially in obstetrics. We can't schedule a baby's delivery date. We have to be ready 24/7, 365 days a year, whenever the baby decides to be delivered. There would be no time for dates or anything like that. Feeling guilty, I apologized to Robert. He replied,
So, why don't we just get married?
Huh? Get married?
Yeah, that way we can always be together. You can go to work whenever you need to. If we have a child, and you suddenly have to go to work, I'll support you.
Surprised by the sudden proposal, I felt comforted by his reassuring words. I remember tearfully saying, Thank you. I appreciate it. OBGYN is the only field that deals with the birth of life. Of course, we also treat diseases, but there's a joy in this field that can't be found anywhere else. It's a job I could call my calling. I'm currently 35 years old. I've been working as an OBGYN for 9 years now. I've witnessed many births and delivered many babies. However, Robert and I have been married for 7 years, and we don't have any children.
We both loved kids, and Robert was eager to have many when we first got married, saying,
I want a lot of kids. I'll work hard.
but that enthusiasm has faded over time. I thought that having children was a blessing, and there was nothing we could do about it, but that no longer seemed to matter. Recently, we hardly ever go out together on our days off. Robert seems to be busy with something in his room all the time. He has put a lock on his room and always locks it when he is inside. We used to sleep together in the same bedroom when we first got married, but because of my work, I sometimes had to leave the house in the middle of the night, so we decided to sleep in separate rooms to avoid disturbing Robert. Also, when I work late or night shifts and I'm not home, Robert also comes home late. I know this because we have a dog at home. We've installed a pet cam in the living room where the dog's kennel is, so we can always watch our pet. The camera is set to send a notification to our phones when someone comes home, so I always know when Robert gets back. Of course, Robert knows about this camera, and we can both view it from our phones. One day, I received a notification on my phone at an unusual time. It was on a day when I was working a night shift, but it seemed like Robert had returned home at the usual time. Normally, I wouldn't mind, but the sound of that notification felt odd. Since I was on break, I immediately checked my phone. On it was a video of my husband and a woman's legs in a skirt. "What's this?" I inadvertently exclaimed aloud in the break room. The other nurses around me asked what was wrong, but I replied with a feigned smile saying it was nothing. After that, the notifications of Robert getting home at the usual time hit more often on the days I worked night shifts. However, whenever I checked, only the woman's feet were visible. Even if I confronted him about it, I thought Robert would play dumb. So I marked the days I was on and off duty on our calendar at home. Then, on that day, I decided to wait for Robert to come home with someone. That person was my younger brother. In fact, I had left my dog at my brother's place since the day after I found out about a woman coming over to my place. I felt guilty about leaving the dog alone in a house where I didn't know when Robert would bring the woman again. I waited in my brother's car for 30 minutes. Robert returned home right on time. There was a woman walking with him, her arm linked with his. Seeing this, I thought I would lose my composure, but maybe because my much younger brother was next to me, I strangely kept my cool. I immediately started recording a video with my phone.
My brother-in-law is bold. Doesn't he worry about being seen by the neighbors?
My brother said after I finished filming the two who had comfortably walked into the entrance. Yeah, there must be neighbors watching.
It would be strange if there weren't people watching at this time.
I found myself agreeing. Looking around, it seemed it was during the rush hour when neighbors were returning home. I hadn't noticed because I worked on an irregular schedule, but I just realized that this is the general time when people return home. That night, I stayed at my brother's house, playing with my beloved dog, and then sleeping. The next day, I decided to visit a neighbor with whom I am particularly close to, and asked about Robert and the woman. It seems the neighbor also found it suspicious and had asked about it. He had apparently answered that she was his sister. The neighbors believed him, since they knew that I also had a brother who was much younger than me. Now that I also had testimony from my neighbor, I was thinking about when to propose a divorce to Robert, when one morning a familiar face appeared in the consultation room.
Thank you in advance.
The woman who entered with a worried voice was none other than, I believe, Robert's mistress. I was about to make a strange sound, but I held it back. I switched into work mode and said, "Congratulations! You're 8 weeks pregnant."
Really? I'm so happy. Doctor, is the baby a girl or a boy?
We can't tell the gender yet, but everything's going well for now.
I see. I wish I could find out soon. He wants a girl.
She was tenderly rubbing her belly, and even though I hadn't asked, she continued.
I'm not married yet, but I'm thinking of getting him to marry me now that I'm pregnant.
Is that so? I replied in a way that wouldn't upset her.
Actually, he's only been divorced for 2 months. They say you can't remarry until 100 days have passed.
Really? Is the father of your baby your boyfriend? At the hospital today?
Yes, he's waiting for me in the car.
She answered with joy. I told her that I'd like to discuss the future with him too, so she went out to call him in with a smile. 15 minutes later, after attending other patients in between, I called her back. Then, as expected, Robert walked in from behind her. Robert blurted,
"Excuse me."
when he caught sight of my professional smile.
"What? Huh? Why is Amy here?"
Saying that, he looked at the nameplate on the office wall and muttered,
"No way."
I work under my husband's surname, not my maiden name. Many female doctors continue to use their maiden names, but in my case, my maiden name was quite rare and difficult to pronounce. However, Robert's last name is the most common surname in the States, so he probably didn't pay much attention to it. At the hospital where I work, there happen to be no doctors with the same last name in the same department, so I only used my last name on the nameplate. Seeing Robert's disturbed look, the woman looked puzzled.
Amy, that's me, right? We came in together. Of course I'm here.
I was stunned by her words. His lover's name is Amelia. Certainly she is Amy. However, calling your wife and mistress by the same nickname is beyond despicable. Being cornered by his mistress, Robert stammered.
No, this is a bit...
So I decided to explain for her. Amelia, my name is Jamie. I'm also Amy.
What? Bobby, you've been cheating?
Bobby? I nearly burst out laughing at the reality of a 35-year-old man being called Bobby. Huh, I see you have her call you Bobby. Did you tell her where I work?
No. I forgot that you worked here.
Robert was taken aback. It seemed he either didn't care or never asked about where I worked. Despite that, his mistress was confronting him.
Bobby, who's this woman?
No.
Robert was unable to explain. Well, that's not surprising, considering that, according to the story I just heard from his mistress, Robert has been divorced from me for the last 2 months. Faced with Robert's silence, I decided to confront the mistress with reality. Amelia, I am Robert's wife.
What? Robert, so you lied about getting a divorce to marry me?
That's when Robert spoke up.
That's not it. For now, just be quiet, Amy.
What are you talking about? We need to clarify this. You've been deceiving me, haven't you?
I said be quiet.
Robert seemed very flustered. Well, of course he would be. No one could remain calm while being accused by their mistress in front of their wife. When did you start seeing Robert?
About a year ago.
Unlike Robert, the mistress answered my question honestly. I see. So, you were aware that Robert was married when you started the relationship, correct?
But Bobby said that his wife was constantly cheating and their marriage was already in ruins.
Regardless, having a relationship while knowing he's married, your act is subject to compensation. I responded with a smile on my face.
But he's already divorced, right?
We're not divorced.
At this point, Robert tried to silence the mistress once again. However, this sparked an argument in the examination room. Several nurses noticed the argument and came into the room. Since this could interrupt subsequent consultations, I called for security to escort the two out. That night, I decided to have a discussion with the two of them at a coffee shop. I thought about some strategies and called my brother during lunch to explain the situation and ask him to join the discussion at night. After hearing the whole story, my brother asked,
I know it's a weird question, but why did you guys not have any kids?
Upon hearing that, I exclaimed, "That's it! Thank you, little brother!" and embraced my brother in a childish way, ruffling his hair. This would certainly be another blow to Robert.
Stop it!
My brother pushed me away, but left me with some supportive words.
Let me know if there's anything I can help with.
I'm not afraid of anything anymore. From here on out, I'm going to hit them with the most severe punishment. That night, as my brother and I waited for them at the coffee shop, they appeared, and the first thing they said was,
You're also having an affair, aren't you?
At these words, my brother spoke up.
Long time no see, brother-in-law. How have you been? Huh? Brother-in-law? You don't mean?
Yes, I was just a teenager when you two got married.
My brother and I are 9 years apart. He's grown quite mature over the past 7 years, so I guess it's understandable that he didn't recognize him. Furthermore, my brother added,
I'm here today as a witness, so please keep that in mind.
Fixing Robert and his lover with a sharp gaze.
Huh? A witness?
Robert looked shocked. In fact, my brother had become a lawyer. Moreover, a lawyer who specializes in divorce cases. He knew about Robert's multiple bar exam failures and had been considerate not to mention it. More importantly, let's continue our conversation from earlier. Here, I brought this. I presented an envelope. Inside was a divorce paper, with my part already filled out. Fill this out. Right now.
What a considerate woman, bringing the papers herself.
Robert retorted, now looking rather smug, and quickly filled out the papers. Robert's lover, seemingly excited, said, "Now, after 100 days, I can officially be Mrs. CEO." However, I immediately asked her, "Mrs. CEO? What are you talking about?"
Robert said he's the CEO of a top-tier company.
Robert's eyes started darting around.
Yeah, that's right.
I couldn't stop laughing. Seeing me doubled over in laughter, Robert's lover looked perplexed.
What's so funny?
Oh, I'm sorry. Who did you say is a CEO? Robert's just an ordinary office worker. And the house? It's under my name. Also, there's no waiting period for men to get remarried after getting a divorce. Upon hearing this, Robert's lover was livid.
What? Robert, how many times were you gonna deceive me? I've had enough.
I thought you loved me.
Well, I thought you were rich and had a big house. Otherwise, why would I fall for an old man like you?
Seeing the two bicker, my brother and I couldn't help but crack a smile. Now it's time to send my husband further into the abyss. I swiftly handed Robert some documents.
What's this now?
Robert took it bluntly, tearing open the envelope. Upon seeing the contents, his face turned as pale as a sheet.
What is this?
Do you remember when we had trouble conceiving and had ourselves checked? This is the result from back then. I didn't mention it because I knew you had some ego.
Is this mine?
Yes. It seems you can't have children. So who's the father of the child inside her, I wonder? I presented him with the test results we had done years ago. According to the results, Robert was infertile. I had not mentioned it to him since I'd come to realize that even without children, we could still be happy together. Upon hearing the news, the other woman didn't consider her surroundings and began to make a scene.
I didn't know you were infertile.
Wait, so it's not my kid? Maybe the test results are fake.
Robert's lover hit and snapped at him.
If you're seedless, it's someone else's. I didn't know who the father was, so I was planning to marry you because you earned the most.
Hearing that, both my brother and I were left speechless. The two of them kept arguing, so we tried to calm them down, worried they disturbed the other customers. But they were unstoppable. My brother, as a lawyer, began to explain to them. He said I would be demanding compensation from both Robert and his mistress. The two of them cried.
We don't have any money.
But that wasn't my problem. My brother told them if they continued to complain, he'd take them to court, and they finally agreed to pay. The next day, I quickly submitted the divorce papers and kicked Robert out of my house. After that, Robert, who was incapable of doing any housework, couldn't live alone, and was disowned by his parents, and ended up marrying his mistress, Amelia. Moreover, he desperately wanted a child, and decided to raise the unborn child as his own, although they didn't know who the father was. Amelia probably figured it would be cheaper to raise the child together and share the burden of the compensation than to pay it on her own. Robert started working like a mule to pay the compensation for both of them. Once Amelia gave birth, she planned to put the baby in daycare and get a part-time job. Meanwhile, I sold my house and stayed with my brother until I found a new place. As I was preparing to move into my new house, my brother asked me not to leave, but I brushed it off saying, "You'll never get a girlfriend if I'm around." Of course, I took the dog, and we are now living together in our new home. Moving forward, I plan to continue working and being involved in bringing many more lives into the world.
I'm going to spend the weekend at my parents' house. I asked my husband if everything was okay as a response to his sudden declaration. It's my parents' 40th wedding anniversary. I figured I should celebrate with them. Really? Then I should go too, right? I thought about it, but it's their anniversary, not a birthday. I'd feel bad dragging you away from your busy work schedule. He was right. I'd be coming off a night shift that day. I decided to embrace his words as a chance to relax at home. I get along well with his parents, and they always take good care of me. Maybe I can send something later to celebrate. My name is Rachel. I'm a nurse, and I'm 32. I met my husband John 3 years ago. We've been married for 2 years now. It feels like we've been together for a long time, but it was nothing compared to his parents' 40 years. His parents have a beautiful relationship, always going out together and even holding hands while taking walks. I look up to them, especially since my parents are divorced. I've always dreamed of having a similar kind of relationship with my husband. One Friday night, John came home with bags full of groceries. I'm cooking at home tomorrow. Cooking is a hobby of his, and he's quite good at it. While I tend to focus on whether something is edible, John is the type who relentlessly pursues the deliciousness of food. We usually take turns cooking, and John's meals are always delicious. But of course they are. He uses quality ingredients. The worst part is, he always leaves me to do the dishes. Not just the dishes, but the pots and pans too. I've asked him to not just cook, but to do the dishes as well. But he never seemed to listen. Don't leave the dishes for your mother to take care of, okay? I reminded him, not wanting to burden his mother on such a special day. He brushed it off with a casual, yeah, as if he didn't take it too seriously, which left me feeling slightly irritated. I asked him to say hi to his parents for me and started getting ready for my night shift. The following day after my shift, I was woken up by a call on my cell phone. It was from my father-in-law. This was unusual because my mother-in-law is usually the one to call. As I answered the phone, I heard my father-in-law's frantic voice on the other end. Rachel, my wife has collapsed. What should I do? What? I jumped out of bed and asked my father-in-law for details. Apparently, she suddenly collapsed, and it seems she has a fever. It's been pretty hot out, so it could be a heat stroke. She was only half conscious, and so I told him to call an ambulance and to let me know when he found out where she'd be taken. I decided to drive to my in-laws' house, which is about a 40-minute drive from my home. I tried calling my husband, but he didn't pick up or call back. As I started to give up on trying to reach him, my father-in-law called again. As suspected, she had a heat stroke and had been rushed to the hospital. I arrived at the hospital and found my father-in-law. He told me that my mother-in-law's condition wasn't critical and is that she is currently receiving an IV. I made my way towards her hospital room. By the way, where's John? Is he in her room? My father-in-law looked puzzled. Wasn't he with you? I tried calling him first, but couldn't get through, so I called you. I assumed he was driving. Hearing this, I furrowed my brow in confusion. But John was over at your place, wasn't he? Now it was my father-in-law's turn to furrow his brow. We exchanged puzzled looks as we walked, but our conversation was interrupted as we reached my mother-in-law's room. Thank God it's nothing serious. Upon hearing that, my mother-in-law, who seemed less energetic than usual, smiled. I'm sorry for all the trouble. Were you at work today? I just finished my night shift, actually. Where's John? Is he working? These words hit me. He said he was heading over to cook you guys a special anniversary meal. The three of us exchanged glances. Feeling that something was off, I tried calling John again. Finally, after several attempts, I managed to get through to him. Oh, thank goodness. Where are you? He responded with something completely unexpected. I'm at my parents', cooking up a storm as filial duty. Sure enough, I heard the sound of chopping over the phone. I managed to think quickly and covered up my confusion. Ah, I see. I must have been half asleep. Sorry about that. You're probably tired from work. I told them you were working, so rest up. John insisted that he was at his parents' place. But his parents were right in front of me. So who on earth was John cooking for? Was he cheating on me? Did he show any signs of it elsewhere? I tried to recall our past interactions, but I couldn't remember anything that might confirm such a suspicion. If I had to point out something, he has been coming home late more often, and I happened to find a receipt from a store for beer and hard seltzer a while ago. I asked about the hard seltzer because John only drinks beer, but he told me that he bought some drinks with a colleague on their way home. They had a venting session while having drinks. I found it understandable and accepted his explanation. These points alone didn't constitute conclusive evidence. As I contemplated such thoughts, my concerned father-in-law came out of the room to check on me. "Is something wrong? Is John coming?" It seems like he had to make an unexpected stop at work. He needs to take care of some trouble, and he might have to work through the night today." I quickly made up a lie. "I see. I'm sorry to put you through all of this. It looks like everything's fine now, so go home and rest." Upon hearing my father-in-law's words, I nodded and headed home. If John really was having an affair, what should I do? If he was going to come home soon, it might be best to pretend to know nothing. I still loved John, and I get along well with his parents. John was always concerned about me, whether it was about my work or my health. He always showed care and worry. Pondering my next move, I arrived home and decided to do a little digging into my husband's belongings. I entered his room. But since I go in there all the time, I didn't find anything suspicious. When I got back to the living room, I noticed a computer. I have my own laptop, so I never used this one. Maybe I'd find something. I opened up the browser history. It seemed he'd been browsing travel sites. Specifically, he was looking at hotels with kitchens. Was that why he was stocking up on groceries? Was he planning to take it to a romantic getaway with a mistress? Still, I wasn't suspicious of my husband to that extent yet. Even today, he might be gathering with friends for all I know. He might have lied about going to his parents' place because he felt guilty about going to have fun while I worked. But the next moment, that thought crumbled. I found a bookmark for a site that allows you to save photos. With a sense of dread, I looked and found definitive evidence of an affair. There were many photos of John with another woman, at dating spots, amusement parks, and some of which looked like they were on a trip somewhere. There were even some nude ones among them. What's more, it seems that it's been happening since shortly after we got married. Which meant I had been deceived by John for 2 years. Once I realized that, I knew I couldn't continue living like this. I also found their email exchanges. I learned from an email that the other woman shared the same birthday as me. Reading through the emails and looking at the photos, I saw that he gifted her jewelry and watches for her birthdays. On my birthdays, he gave me practical things like aprons to help with housework or recipe books to improve my cooking. The difference in gifts given to the mistress was like night and day. Moreover, the mistress was the one he'd been celebrating on the day of our shared birthday. I often worked night shifts, so our schedules didn't always match, but I never thought she was the higher priority. My feelings towards John took a complete 180-degree turn. The mistress was a junior colleague of John's. She even came to our wedding. I remember she came up to me and said, "I have the same birthday as you." Judging from the emails, it seemed like the mistress initiated the affair, but John had easily accepted her invitations to go out. I discovered an email where he said, "My wife earns a decent income, and she nurses me without complaints when I'm sick, so I don't plan on divorcing her for now." Upon finding this, there was no way I could stay silent. I decided on divorce. I captured some of this evidence on my phone. Upon realizing that it was already midnight, I decided to go to bed. The next day, I started looking for a divorce attorney, but I had no idea which one to choose. Just as I was lost in my thoughts, the doorbell rang. I flinched, thinking that my husband might have come home. But when I went to open the door, it turned out to be my mother-in-law. Startled, I invited her in. I learned that she returned home from the hospital yesterday, right after she got her IV, and was now here to thank me. She even brought me a small gift. As I spoke with my mother-in-law, a sense of sadness began to overwhelm me. I was lucky to have such wonderful in-laws, and the thought of leaving them was heartbreaking. Seeing my distress, my mother-in-law spoke to me kindly. "If something's bothering you, you can talk to me about it." Moved by her words, I couldn't help but pour out everything to her. When I finished, I was worried that she might be angry at what I'd said about her son. "Is that true? That's unforgivable." I showed her the evidence of John's infidelity, and she became more incensed. "Cheating makes no one happy. Why would John do something like this?" Then, to my surprise, my mother-in-law made a proposal I hadn't expected. "Rachel, why don't you pack your bags and come to our house?" "What?" While I was still surprised, my mother-in-law started making a phone call. It seemed she was talking to my father-in-law. I heard her telling him to prepare a room at their home. Encouraged by my mother-in-law, I began to pack my things. The immediate essentials I needed were just a change of clothes and my laptop. We decided on moving out the bigger items later. After I loaded my bag into my car and my mother-in-law got settled, we drove to her house where my father-in-law greeted us. There was a woman I didn't recognize sitting in the living room. Just as I was wondering who she was, I learned she was a lawyer. My father-in-law had reached out to her at my mother-in-law's request. "You have to act quickly in situations like this." He seemed quite pleased with himself as he said. In front of my in-laws, I expressed to the lawyer that I wanted a divorce and that I intended to claim alimony. I struggled to keep up with the sudden turns of events, but expressing my intentions gave me a sense of determination. The thought that I was being treated like a cash cow, belittled by my husband and his mistress, made my blood boil. Even his own parents were furious at his behavior. That night, I received a phone call from home. "Where are you? I dropped my cell phone in water and couldn't contact you. Sorry." The moment I heard John's voice, my anger peaked. "I've moved out. It's up to you to decide whether you want to stay or move out. I'll collect the rest of my belongings by the end of the week." Upon hearing this, John started panicking. "What? What are you talking about? What's happening?" At his words, I felt nothing but anger. "You've been cheating on me, and now you're asking me what's happening?" John, seemingly confused, started spouting nonsense. "Cheat? Me? Why? How?" He seemed eager to ask how I found out. That was when my mother-in-law took the phone from me. "Come home immediately." "Huh? Mom? What?" Ignoring my confused husband, I hung up the phone. Less than an hour later, John arrived at his parents' house. "Rachel, what's going on? Why are you here?" I sighed at John, who rushed in after hastily opening the door. "How did it feel to serve homemade meals to your mistress in a hotel with a kitchen?" Upon hearing this, John went pale. "How did you have the nerve to say that you were going to celebrate your parents' 40th anniversary with a homemade meal? You had the audacity to go on trips with your lover while your mother was in the hospital." "Huh? What happened to Mom?" Then, at that moment, John's father came out and started yelling. "Your mother was taken away in an ambulance. I called you several times. You're not welcome in this house after today. Once we're done talking, don't ever show your face here again. Also, I want you to return the car you drove here. It's still in my name." John's father snatched the car keys from him. Because John commutes by car, I knew how inconvenient it would be for him to have this option taken away. Inwardly, I felt a bitter sense of satisfaction. Later, my mother-in-law came out and shouted, "We know everything about your shameful affair. Your father and I are on Rachel's side, not yours." Our lawyer had already left, so I directly expressed my intention to get a divorce. John panicked with a pale face. "Divorce? We can't. Why? I always help with household chores. I even cook." At my husband's desperate reaction, all I was able to do was sigh. "Helping out with household chores? You mean taking out the trash or putting away laundry? You don't even know how to use the washing machine. Have you ever cleaned the bathroom or the toilet?" "But I cook." His words made me snap. "You claim to be cooking, but cooking is complete when you clean up afterwards. You buy fancy ingredients, cook, and then act all smug saying, "Isn't it delicious?" Well, of course it's delicious. Shouldn't you be considering the food expenses when cooking? John retorted, obviously irritated. Huh? My dishes taste way better than yours. Cleaning up is easy. It's the cooking that's hard. Just yesterday, my girl told me everything was delicious. He was obviously referring to his mistress. Well, of course, in a hotel kitchen, you don't have to worry about cleaning up. She got to enjoy the expensive food you bought with your money, so of course she thought it was delicious. John, who didn't like my tone, yelled back, "Fine then, let's get a divorce or whatever. I'm done with you." He stormed out of the house. With his car keys taken away by my father-in-law, he reluctantly started walking. He looked pathetic from the back. The following day, I closed the bank account from which our living expenses were being withdrawn from. I wasn't going to pay for rent or any of the utility bills with my money anymore. I sent the divorce papers to John and made sure to include a substantial claim for property division and compensation for emotional distress. John, perhaps out of rage, agreed to the divorce and even the financial terms. He made a single payment to cover the expenses, but it appears that his savings fell short and he had to take out a loan from a consumer loan company. When I went to pick up my belongings later, I saw some unfamiliar items in the house. Perhaps the mistress had moved in. But that wasn't my problem anymore. Of course, I demanded compensation from the mistress through my lawyer as well. A month later, I received a phone call from my ex-husband. "I'm receiving bills for rent and electricity." He just realized it now. Well, that's to be expected since the bills weren't being automatically withdrawn anymore. "Of course you received them. I've closed the bank account we were using for withdrawals." My ex-husband was speechless. "Why should I be responsible for paying rent for a place I don't even live in? Your standard of living will have to drop a bit, but you guys will figure it out. Although I doubt you can afford to keep living there on your salary." With that, I hung up the phone. He makes about half of what I make. If he pays the rent, he'll hardly have any money left for living expenses. The truth is, I had been covering a significant portion of our living expenses. My ex-husband later asked to reconcile, but of course I ignored him. According to John's parents, he became uncomfortable at his job and quit. He showed up at their place, but his father turned him away. I had already moved out of his parents' house and rented an apartment. I don't communicate with my ex-husband anymore, but I occasionally get in touch with his parents, and we still have a good relationship. Seeing them walking hand in hand to this day, I made up my mind to find someone with whom I could eventually have such a relationship.